Hello everyone and welcome yet again to today's Business Skills webcast. My name is Sara Gonzalez and I'm from Redback Conferencing. Today we're going to be uncovering sales and marketing alignment and where it matters most. We're joined by Peter Strohkorb and he's here to uncover it all. Now Peter, we hear it all the time. Salespeople are from Mars or Venus, whichever one you want to pick. You know, the marketing people are from the other side, and there's always this dispute about leads and then generation and everything happening. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about the disconnect that has been existing for over 10 years now and is still not really being fixed. And I'll give you a little story about some anecdotes that I've heard myself.
Yeah.
Like I personally have heard people say. And that is the head of marketing in a very large organization in New South Wales said this: what's the difference between salespeople and marketing people?
A lot.
And education, she said.
Really?
She was kind of insinuating that salespeople have no education and marketing people have a degree, so therefore they're something better.
Yep.
On the other hand, I've heard salespeople say that all marketing people are wusses because real men carry sales targets.
Of course.
Right?
Yep.
So that you get that disconnect between the different people.
And it's something that we all of us have been on either side of, or we've all either witnessed within an organisation. I think marketing and sales crosses so many different facets of an organisation. So really just wanted to understand from you, how long has this been going on for, and are we slowly starting to fix it?
Yeah, okay. So as I was saying, the disconnect has been there for over 10 years, and I say 10 years because that's when Neil Rackham and Philip Kotler released their now epic paper called Ending the War Between Sales and Marketing. No, they used the term war to describe a relationship that should be cohesive.
Yep.
And it's a pretty strong word, right? I mean, they could have used gap or disconnect or any sort of milder thing, but they used the term war. And 10 years later, we still haven't fixed it. And the other thing that's happened is that we've had the 9 and a bit years of global financial crisis, and consecutive CEOs have swept out every corner of the organisation and tried to find productivity gains and find cost savings, for nearly 10 years now.
Yep.
And still, we haven't touched this very obvious piece in any organisation whereby sales and marketing don't actually work as well together as they could. And if they did, then they would be much more productive and sales could do better because marketing supports them better, and marketing would better understand how to better support sales if they only talk to each other.
So is this something that happens in all organisations, do you think?
Sadly, yes, it does. And you'd think that the smaller organisations would be better at this because they could just sit together and say, hey, Sarah, what do you think, for my marketing campaign?
Communication.
And you say, exactly, right. But I'll show you something. We did some research in 2014 and we found that out of 185 B2B organisations in Australia, over 80% operated separate sales and marketing silos. Yep. 80%. Wow. Right? And what happens in those is this, that at the top level, the people that report to the CEO, the COO, the C-suite, the senior management, they talk on a regular basis and they talk to each other, and they report to the CEO, so they pretty much have to, play nice. At the middle management level, it's a bit more disconnected, and it's kind of, depending on the personal relationships that you have. But at the front line, you really have the disconnect happening. You really have the salespeople saying, well, marketing is useless, and the marketing people saying, well, sales is lazy, and that's just not really a healthy environment. So the point I'm making here is that the CEO and the senior management may or may not be aware of what's going on down below, that the disconnect is really as bad as it is.
So for everyone sitting out there, including myself, because this is insight for me as well, I'm on the marketing side, by the way, how do we see the symptoms within this? So obviously we're there in the day-to-day business and we're doing stuff and we're talking and we're communicating, but how do we take a step back and understand the symptoms of what's actually happening within our organisation?
So how do you know that you have that problem? Right, so I've collated a few things here for you. So there's 10 points that you can look out for in an organisation, whether you have a problem. So, for example, a common problem is too many sales reps are not achieving their targets. So you could say, well, how is it the fault of marketing, or how is it the fault of sales? It could just be the targets, it could be the salespeople, but that's one of the symptoms that when sales and marketing are not collaborating, that you actually get people missing their sales targets. One of the other ones is, for example, that marketing panders to a small minority of high-profile salespeople. So imagine your best sales performer comes into the office and says, "Sarah, I need this from you right now. Otherwise, it'll be your fault if I don't get that deal." Right?
That never happens.
And Sarah goes, "Oh my God, I better quickly do it." Right? And so all of a sudden, there's a marketing team working for one person as opposed to the whole team. So there's 10 points there in terms of what to look out for.
What's the biggest point, do you think, that we tend to see? The biggest one of those in organisations?
The biggest one is the mindset. It's hard to track because the further down the pyramid you get, the more obvious it becomes, and so you actually got a deep dive into the organisation. But it's the one really that causes the most problems.
So once we've uncovered, some of these symptoms, we've taken a step back, we've realised that we do have an issue here.
Yes.
What's our first step, and what do we then have to do about it to make sure that do we have to get buy-in from sales, or does sales, whose decision is this to take it forward?
Okay, so that's a simple question, hard to answer. But
loaded question?
Yeah, no, what happens often is that you go to the head of sales and you say, I'd like to help you work more effectively with your marketing people. And the head of sales might say, it's like nearly the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and I'm really busy trying to bring in the sales revenue that I'm targeted for. I don't really have time. If you want to fix up marketing, talk to marketing. Right? So talk to marketing, and they say, "Oh, no, we got on fine with our salespeople. We don't have that problem here." And this denial is quite common. And it's largely because the marketers feel that they could be blamed if the relationship is not a good one, right? So we've got this denial going on. And so the target is really where sales and marketing come together. Whoever they report into, they have that interest that both of them work together really well. And I've put something together here that I call a bit of tough love. Yeah. And it's basically three tough love pointers for organisations, and basically saying to the salespeople, stop passing the buck and blame marketing that the leads are no good. Talk to them. Marketing, stop hiding behind your technology and pretend that content marketing is now everything and social media marketing is now everything and it's going to generate the leads for sales just by itself. Talk to your salespeople. And CEOs and business leaders and sales leaders and marketing leaders, stop pretending that everything's okay between your sales and marketing people and start doing something about it, because the denial is actually hindering the progress that will give you the business growth.
Do you think a lot of this stems down to the fact that there maybe isn't a lot of understanding between sales and marketing? So for marketing people who haven't been in a sales role before, or vice versa, that's where a lot of this stems from? Absolutely.
In my universe, the sales role is a big picture role. Create the brand, create the image, create the attraction, do the white papers, the thought leadership, marketing role, and it's sort of more big picture. But then if you imagine upside down pyramid, then sales are meant to take over and bring it to the pointy end of transaction. And somewhere in the middle, they actually have to talk to each other and collaborate. And that's often not happening, because the salespeople have a more short-term outlook on life, end of the month, end of the quarter. Yeah. And the marketers have a more bigger picture perspective, and they talk more about the brand, which the salespeople think is all fluffy, and vice versa.
So what are some situations where this has happened in? I think you've got a few case studies you're going to go through to sort of help people along that journey.
Yes.
We're not in this alone, people. It does happen to everyone. That's right. Let's talk about the first success story.
Okay, so I've brought two along, one very small one and one very large one, just to contrast and to show that the problems are ubiquitous. Yeah. So this is a 2-year-old startup. This is Brent, the CEO, and he came to me and said, "Look, we're a 2-year-old startup," even though I think 2 years startup, and they also have 16 people in the organisation, so they're not that small. Yeah. They have a whole bunch of contractors, so in total it's over 60 people in the organisation, and he still calls it a startup. Okay, but he said that even though they only have 2 locations, they have an office in Sydney and an office in Brisbane. Marketing sits in Brisbane, the sales force, of course, in both locations. And even with just 16 people in the organisation, 16 full-time people in the organisation, and just 2 locations, they still had that disconnect between sales and marketing. So the salespeople were still selling a campaign that marketing had since discontinued, and marketing had launched a new campaign that sales just didn't know about or didn't want to know about. And so they were not making the deals. And the biggest problem for Brent was that his financiers were getting very nervous. So they're funded by venture capital, and they were going, show us the money, right? And so he got us engaged, and within 6 weeks of employing our methodology to bring sales and marketing together, he was able to close some very large deals that they weren't able to before. And in fact, coming off a low base, it was an improvement of 433%. Right, 433%. Now that's not a common, goal. It's common success, but in this case, it's really what happened within a 6-week period.
So what are some things that you actually implemented there? Because I think that a lot of us can relate to the fact that you've got, especially when you expand as a startup, so you've got different personalities and different ways of doing business, but also into different states. Because in that situation, the people in Brisbane may have been close with the marketing team, but maybe not in the other state.
Exactly.
How do you bridge that gap and enhance that communication when you are communicating across geographical barriers?
The problem actually was the other way around.
Really?
The people in Brisbane didn't believe that they could achieve the sales that marketing gave, sales targets, sales prices that marketing gave them. Because they said, in Sydney it's easy to sell at those prices, but not in Brisbane, right?
Yeah.
And by liaising between the salespeople in Sydney and figuring out how they sold it and what support they needed from the marketing people in Brisbane, they could actually turn that around and educate the salespeople in Brisbane that it was in fact possible to sell at those prices in Queensland as well. And in fact, that improvement in sales came predominantly out of the Brisbane office in the end.
Great. If we go to the next one, and I'm just going to just let everyone know, I do have my trusty iPad here, so any questions that you do ask will come through here. If you've been in a similar situation like this, or you do have some questions for Peter, please feel free to type them in and we'll get to you shortly. So success story number 2, what are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is a $500 million energy company.
A bit different then?
Yep. They have 60 people just in sales and in marketing alone.
Wow. They
have a direct sales force, an indirect reseller sales force, an inbound call center, an outbound call center. And I had breakfast with the CEO, and he said to me something like, there's something wrong in sales and marketing. I don't know quite what it is. Remember the pyramid that I showed before? Yeah. So the disconnect, right? So he said, I sense there's something wrong, but I can't quite put my finger on it. So we worked with Amy here, who's the head of sales and marketing at this company. And we found out that there was a huge disconnect at the coalface, at the front line. So the people in the call center felt completely disconnected from the rest of the place. Their call scripts came from legal.
Wow.
Right. and they felt that they were not listened to and not really relevant to the organization. And so their attitude, their employee engagement was terrible. Right? Now, we then employed the OneTEAM Method with them, and that was in February of last year. And then 4 months later, so in June, do you remember when the phone network dropped out in the afternoon of the 30th of June last year?
Telstra,
yeah. I wasn't going to say it. and what happened was that, what's the worst thing that can happen to a call center on the last day of the financial year, right?
Yeah.
The phone's dropping out. So if that had happened back in February, the people would have just said, oh, look, it's close to knocking off time anyway. We'll just go home, call us if it gets fixed.
Yeah.
Right? On that 30th of June, 2016 in the afternoon, the people in the call centre said, yes, the phone might be down, but we still have our own personal mobiles. We'll continue to make calls on our personal mobiles because we're so close to hitting our sales target. Right? Can you see that complete turnaround in attitude and engagement simply because we enabled them to be listened to give advice, to take advice, to collaborate and communicate between the marketing team in Melbourne and the call centre in Hobart. Right? That geographical distance made it worse for them as well. And they were actually able to contribute back to marketing and saying, look, what if we change the script that way? Or if we talk to a blue-collar person a different way than to a white-collar person, or to a business in a different way to a household.
So is one of the things that we can start doing then is sort of working together. I think there's a difference between communicating and collaborating. So, for example, should marketing, be more across the scripts that are going out and the way people are talking to each other? And should they be responsible for every single touch point? And that includes even going on some sales meetings.
They should actually ideally that's sit together, right?
Yeah.
Because, if I'm in Hobart and you're in Melbourne, it's going to be hard for us to collaborate.
Yeah.
But if we're sitting here and I can just lean over and say, hey, Sarah, what do you think of this campaign?
Yeah.
Right? And you can say, well, that would work for my client, but you could make it better if you did that, right? So collaboration happens instantly. Yeah. The way that I'm going to talk about the way the OneTEAM method rolls out a bit later in more detail, but basically it starts off with understanding where the organisation is at today, so that the CEO and the senior management can understand exactly what's going on at the coalface, right? And you've got to bring in a third party for that, because if you try to find out yourself, nobody's going to tell you the truth.
You can be too close to it.
Well, they're just going to feel uncomfortable telling you what they really think.
Yeah.
And then the next step then is to say, well, how does it affect our customers, right? So sales and marketing should come together at the customer. If sales and marketing are not talking to each other, then that has implications for the customer, and so we'll want to find out what does it look like for them, right? And again, they won't tell the organisation directly, but they'll tell Switzerland.
Yeah.
Right? And then we go, okay, we have now information from within the organisation, from our customers. What are we going to do with it? Well, we facilitate our clients to develop their own plan, to do something based on the feedback that they've received from both within the organisation and outside the organisation, right? And for us, it's very important that that's your plan, right? Because we don't want to be the consultant, the guru that comes from the outside and says, here's how you're going to run your life from now on, because people are not going to do it.
Yep.
But if we help you to make it your idea, then you're going to believe it much better than if it's our idea.
Yeah.
Right? And then the next step is for us to help you actually implement that. So we'll talk about that in more detail.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about these centres of excellence that you speak of here.
Yes. So the question that I get asked often is, how do we get here? Why do we have those silo structures?
Yeah.
And what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s in last century was that the management gurus very much came up with the idea, we need to create these centres of excellence. We need to establish competencies for each different category of business that we do. And so we ended up, as you see in the slide here, we have purchasing, marketing, sales, operations, legal, logistics, whatever has its own silo.
Yeah.
And then we put a manager on top of each silo to manage that centre of excellence, really well. And then we stopped talking between the silos. So now we're trying to break down the silo structure and create multidisciplinary teams that actually run across the silos. Account-based marketing is a great example of that.
Yep.
Right? Where you put your salespeople, your marketing people, and maybe your service team together to target one lighthouse or must-win account together. And that automatically gels them if you get them to focus on the customer jointly.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts then, and we spoke about Amy in that second case study there, sales and marketing director. That's sales and marketing in one role. And I know some different organisations have different thoughts on how this should happen within an organisation. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I think it's a great idea provided you have a competent person in the lead.
Yeah.
So I know organisations where a dyed-in-the-wool sales manager has all of a sudden inherited marketing.
Yeah.
And they don't know anything about marketing really, but they just go, well, they should generate leads.
Yeah.
Right? So all of a sudden, marketing is not producing thought leadership and brand imaging and that sort of thing anymore. They're just being pushed down to this lead generation function, and which is
sales focus,
which is really a shame.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have a born marketer running a sales operation, they're not going to drive them enough to get their targets. So it should actually be somebody who has a good understanding of both sales and marketing to be effective.
To do that. Okay, and this is a funnel that you were relating to earlier.
Yes, well, this is kind of the role of marketing being, as I said, the brand building, the thought leadership, and then sales driving it down to the pointy end of transaction. But they've got to have that connection in the middle for that to work seamlessly.
Yep, and making sure it all ties in together.
Yes.
So things have changed, and I think this is quite exciting for marketers as well. When it does come, there's a lot of talk about the buyer's journey and creating this customer experience. But then you've got salespeople focusing on that sales cycle. So how do we sort of bridge the gap and bring it all together? And you're talking here about the traditional sales cycle. How has that changed over the past few years?
Okay, it's changed and it's not changed.
Yep.
Right? There's a lot. If you follow Tony Hughes and follow LinkedIn, there's a lot of debate about the value of cold calling and how we're going away from cold calling, but we still must do it. So the traditional sales cycle is not dead. Salespeople still need to go out and generate their own business.
Yep.
They can't just rely on marketing to do that for them. You know? But because we're in the buyer's journey, and a lot of our customers come out of the blue after they've done a lot of research, and they've selected us to come to. So they've done their research. They know exactly what they can get from where. They roughly know what prices they're prepared to pay, and they have chosen 2 or 3 suppliers that they could help them, usually, right?
Yep.
And they have chosen who to contact, and they've chosen the time at which they contact. Right? So for a vendor, this is terrible because all of a sudden these buyers come out of the woodworks, and they know more about our services and goods and products that we sell than we do, than the sales rep does. And they demand to know these answers because they've done their research. They have some very specific questions now that they just surprise the rep with, right? So the role of the rep must change in this scenario as well, because the buyer is not expecting somebody who can sell them stuff. The buyer is expecting a subject matter expert that can help them make an informed decision, right? And from a sales perspective, you want to be that person that can help them buy from us, right? So we now need to have a more advisory role. But the reason I've shown this slide here is that there's a very strong line that runs across from left to right that says, while the buyer's in the research phase, they're in the domain of marketing. So they're online, they're reading our white papers, they're looking at our website. Yep. But there comes a time when they've decided the time is right, that they actually want to speak to a human being, right?
Yep.
And that transition is actually very critical for an organization, because if you don't give them a seamless, consistent experience, they can just take their business somewhere else.
And that really goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, how if salespeople don't know the content that's being pushed out there, they don't understand the brand and that big picture, that customer's then not getting that consistent experience, are
exactly
they?
Right. Yeah.
So it's important that we talk to each other. It just sounds so simple, doesn't it? Yeah. But are there more things we can do than just talk to each other? You know, something as simple as having regular meetings, or like we said, going out on sales meetings with people. What are some other things that we can actually apply today that can help this experience?
Yes, there are, and I'll talk to you about what not to do as well.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you just communicate better, right? And there's a beautiful line by somebody called Neil Rackham, who's a 30-year sales industry veteran, and he's the author of Spin Selling and the founder of Hathwaite. And he said about our OneTEAM Method, he said that it's the only structured methodology that he knows of that is really simple without being simplistic.
Sorry. See, it's live. It's not all pre-recorded.
and he says it goes way beyond the usual mantra of the CEO saying, guys, just communicate better, right? Because if I give you an order to communicate better, it's
what does that mean?
It's not going to work by itself, right? So what organisations often do is they implement these quick fixes, right? And we have the sales manager saying, it's the end of the month, quick, do something that gives us a return within the quarter or a return within the month. So we do all these quick fixes.
Or just send an email out. Just send a discount email out.
Yeah, well, look, I spoke with a very large telco organisation here, and the MD still wanted to put sales leads out 1 month out from the end of the financial year, when the sales cycle is 3 months. Right? It's not going to have an impact on the final on the end of the month.
Yeah.
So what are the things that we do as quick fixes? So one is sales training. Our sales reps are not selling enough, they're not achieving their targets. Quick, let's give them more sales training. Right? But sales training by itself is not really that effective. It needs to be reinforced with the regular coaching so that it becomes common practice within the organisation for the sales rep to actually practice what's being preached. Taking them out of the field for 3 days, sitting them in a training course, and then patting them on the back saying good luck is not going to do it.
Who's closing the leads?
Right. And there's a German psychiatrist from the 1800s called Hermann Ebbinghaus, who said that 90% of what you learn is forgotten if it's not being reinforced within 3 months, right? So it needs to be reinforced with coaching, but just the sales training alone is not going to make any difference. Another one is that we say, okay, well, if we had more reps, we would sell more, right? But hiring more reps is risky because the risk of getting the hire wrong is high. The cost to find out whether they're any good or not is high.
Yeah.
$60,000 for the first 6 months, according to Forrester. And it takes 3 to 6 months before you find out whether they're any good or not, right? And you pay them during that ramp-up time, so it's costly and risky. Then you say, okay, well, if we just stuff more leads in the top of the funnel, then more sales will drop out the bottom. But it's got to be the right kind of leads. You know, we've now got a situation whereby we get spammed and bombarded with stuff that's got no relevance to us. I don't know, but if you ever look in your email spam filter, right?
It's ridiculous.
There's stuff there that bears no resemblance to what we do, who we are, and people just put stuff out hoping that something will stick. It's not going to generate more business.
It's quality over quantity, isn't it?
You've got to look after the quality. That's exactly right. And then the last one is that we need more technology. You know, we're now saying, we've got a disconnect between sales and marketing. Let's use a bit of tech to fix it up, because tech is in, right? Yeah. And so we get these CRM systems, and we get these silos that are just have this, you know, what I call the Band-Aid solution.
I just, going back to those 4 what not to do, all those solutions, like everyone out there, just put your hand up if you've ever heard that before. You've been sitting in a meeting, okay, we've got an issue, let's get more salespeople, we need more leads. Like it's just such a common thing that resonates with so many people, and we've all heard it at least once or twice. And, there's times when it's actually been done, and then you just sit here and it's like, do you know what? Yes. Now that I hear it from an outsider, it's probably not the best idea. There's probably some other things that we can be doing.
Well, and the other thing, Sarah, is that, we keep doing the same thing expecting a different result.
It's insane.
Every month, every quarter, every year. It's terrible. But just coming back to the technology quickly, so we're trying to close the gap, not with more communication, but with technology.
Yep.
Right? And the technology is supposed to give us the communication. But I just want to show you something funny.
Yep.
So here's a couple of slides over the years of marketing technology brands.
That's hurting my eyes.
That are out there. So you can see in August 2011 it was pretty dense already, right?
Yeah.
So if we go to September 2012,
getting worse.
doubles.
Wow.
And if we look at March 2016, there's over 3,500 brands out there trying to sell you MarTech, right? And each one of them, I bet you, is saying, just buy our software, and a miracle will occur, and all these salespeople.
And they're those emails that I'm getting in my spamming box every single day from people like this.
Well, the other funny thing, I don't have a slide for this here today, but the other funny thing is that, did you know there's an arms race going on between the marketers pushing out messages and the consumers putting in spam avoidance software? Right? So we're both spending money. Marketing,
to fight each other.
Marketers more to get more out, and consumers more to avoid. Right? Is that crazy or what?
So should we then, this is probably more a marketing question, but should be more about, this goes back to exactly what you're saying, so I know you're going to agree with it, but it is more about focusing on the content and the thought leadership and the brand as opposed to the technology. Getting that out there and then getting everyone to work together and understand it. Because if I'm a consumer and I'm going out there and I've done my research and I've found out who I want to contact and who I want to call, if I'm then getting that consistent experience from a sales and marketing arena, really, I'm going to be more inclined to buy, aren't I?
Yeah, but look, it's like this. If I can have confidence that you know what you're talking about and you can give me proper advice, not just sell me something, then I'm going to buy from you. Because you're educating me, you give me a pleasant experience, we still buy from people that we like and trust and know. But if your website says one thing and your sales rep says something different, I go, something's wrong here, I better go to the other guys.
So should marketing be doing the sales training?
Actually, what wouldn't hurt is if marketing participates in the sales training and if salespeople have a bit of an understanding of marketing basics, right? So that they know where they're coming from. Because at the moment, like you said, Venus and Mars, right? They're not on the same page.
Okay, interesting. So we're all fighting for technology and information, clearly, judging by this.
Well, we're trying to paper over the cracks with technology at the moment. I think it's wrong, right?
So what's this research?
So there's 3 pieces of research that I brought today, and I'll just step through them quickly. But the first one is by LinkedIn. It came out late 2016. The URL is there on the screen if you want to download the report yourself. But LinkedIn quantified the gap between sales and marketing as a $1 trillion opportunity, or if you like to put it the other way around, a $1 trillion cost to business in the US alone each year.
Wow.
So if we close the gap between sales and marketing in all the US companies, the US economy would benefit by $1 trillion, right? Just in the US alone. Now, this next stat is one that I love, and it's one that only LinkedIn can produce. It actually shows how many salespeople within their own organization are connected to their own marketing people.
Are you serious? Is that big, the gap?
That's the gap, right? Fewer than half the salespeople are actually connected to their own marketers.
What?
So that just shows they're not talking to each other.
And they're supposed to be sharing the content and carrying on this thought leadership online.
Yep.
I'm going to go and check this when I get back to my desk. But I would like to see, are there any stats as to, with marketers within organisations, how many of them have sales experience or vice versa?
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I know, coming back to the original question about what makes a good sales and marketing leader, it's somebody who has insight into both camps.
Who's got the insight
right?
into both.
And
I'm just shocked by that stat, sorry.
Well, that's, LinkedIn's showing us something that only LinkedIn can show us, because we can't see that, right? They can. But I just want to show you this report. This only came out in February of this year by a company called Altify, and they tried to put a bit of a benchmark onto the business of the future. But interestingly, part of the 86-page report is about sales and marketing teams. I'm just going to throw you a couple of slides here. So this is what does sales do well and what doesn't sales do well, right? Or what are we saying about sales? Now, the blue is sales, sales' responses, and the yellow is marketing's response, and the green is the average between the two.
Okay.
Right? So without going into each detail of what each bar means, sales is talking itself up, right? Sales is saying, we're doing fine in all these areas, and marketing is saying, I don't think so, right? Now, let's flip the tables, and what about marketing, right? In this slide, yellow is marketing, blue is still sales, and the green is still the average. And can you see how all the yellows stick out? That's marketing saying, yep, we're doing well. We're doing really well.
So we're both as bad as each other. I didn't want to see that.
Well, if they were really well aligned, they would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't. All right. Now, this is a key finding of the report itself, and it says the single biggest marketing contribution to improved results is sales and marketing working well together. The single biggest opportunity. Right? Now, here we are, 10 years after Kotler and Rackham, right? And we're still not doing it. It makes me cranky.
I can see that.
Now, and this is also a slide of the Altify report. And you can see half a dozen different stats there, but the one that sticks out to me is that the ones where the salespeople, where the organization's saying that our sales and marketing organizations work well together, they have an 18% shorter sales cycle and a 26% higher win rate compared to the organizations that didn't have that.
Wow.
Now, who in sales would like to have an 18% shorter sales cycle and 26% higher win rates, right? Would that get you to your target? Would that get you to your quota?
Yep.
So why don't we bloody do it?
Yeah, well, that's the question, right? But then the other thing that comes through, and Sophie's actually made a good point here, how do we know when our teams are working together? Is it just numbers-based? Are there any other factors? Are we happier? Are we holding hands and jumping around the office?
Absolutely. If you actually hang out together, that's a good sign. But when we come to the part where I talk about the OneTEAM Method, there's actually some specific metrics we can take to measure it not just on a dollar and cents basis, but actually on a interrelational collaborative metric.
Okay.
Right. So I just want to finish off with this report that we did in 2014. So this is 185 B2B organizations, and the first question we asked was, did you grow your revenue last year, yes or no? And then we put the yeses into one group and the nos into another, and we looked at how do they interact between their sales and marketing teams. Right? And the key research findings were that it's about communication.
Yeah.
Right? And it means communication both ways.
Yep.
Right? The other one was that with communication comes deeper insight. What works, what doesn't work, what can we do more, what should we drop, and then have the right technology to support that. Don't lead with the technology and think that because you have a new CRM, a miracle will occur, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I gave a talk the other day for CEB, and I asked the people in the room, this is a room full of senior level sales and marketing people, and I asked the people in the room and I said, who's got CRM? Everybody, right?
Yeah.
Who's had 2 CRMs? Who's had 3? And I said, did the third one work any better than the first one? Right? And they all said, no, it didn't. So it's not the technology that makes the difference, it's the people using the technology.
Well, and from my personal experience as well, so we use sales marketing automation as a platform, and we've gone through 2 different platforms, and it integrates with our CRM.
Yes.
But no matter how much work you put into it, and no matter how much content you produce or what sort of platform you're using, if you don't have buy-in from those salespeople, and if the salespeople aren't using it properly, then you're wasting your money at the end of the day. Yeah. So firsthand, I really understand that.
Well, there is a stat by CSR Insight, sponsored by Accenture, ironically, that says that 85% of business technology implementations do not live up to their business case.
Wow.
85%. Right?
That's astounding.
And we know from, I think it's Forrester that says CRM utilization rates are less than 50%.
And we spend so much time and money on these things, don't we?
But have you ever met a salesperson who likes filling in forms?
I'm not going to answer that.
So, if the data is not clean, if it doesn't get utilised, it just doesn't.
And there's always this thing of, we need to make it easier, we need to make it easier, we need to make it easier, which, what is easier?
Well, there's the need to make it easier and simple for the salespeople so they actually use it, versus the wants from senior management for all this information and analysis data, right? So I want to know how long the sales cycle is and how, blah, 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 blah. So the senior executives want 85 fields in the CRM, and salespeople want 3, so it's... so we have a bit of a disconnect there as well, that's right.
All right, we're almost to the end. So let's talk about this method that you've been teasing us about throughout the whole 40 minutes, and how that all works and comes together.
Okay, so we'll skip through all that. So what we don't want is a situation where both sales and marketing each are talking to the customer through different channels, marketing online and sales more or less directly, and they're not talking to each other, because then you get that risk of confusing the customer when you tell different stories, right? So what we want is this picture here. This is really the whole story.
Yep.
If we all collaborate, I call this the virtuous cycle of collaboration among all the 3 parties there, the salespeople, the marketing people, and the customer. Then the salespeople interact with the customer, and the customer says things like, oh, no, but your competitor's doing this, or that's too expensive, or whatever it is. We can feed that back to marketing. Right? Marketing can then say, that's good, we'll know what the objections are, so we'll give you stuff back that you can actually counter with, right? Or we'll produce a new white paper, or we'll
do something.
Campaigns, events, whatever. So if sales tells marketing what's happening at the coalface, then marketing has a much better picture of what's going on, and they can respond to that and support sales better to then have a more effective interaction with the customer. At the same time, that feedback from sales can also then serve for marketing to produce new content and campaigns and thought leadership and white papers and stuff, so that the customer is drawn more to our brand and goes, these guys really know what they're talking about, I'm going to talk to them. Right? So that's the content marketing part of it. And it all happens if we only talk to each other. It really is as simple as that. But we've had more than 10 years of neglect. We've had ingrained behaviors, habits, beliefs. That is just in people's heads that says, they're useless, better not talk to them. And often we have the marketing team sitting together at head office, and the salespeople are also in head office but on a different floor. And then, of course, we have the branch teams that are even further removed. And so we're actually fostering this disconnect, and it becomes this us and them attitude. So how do we overcome it? How do we go from a situation where we have a silo mindset, where we're not talking to each other, to just a technology or process mindset, where we're trying to paper over the cracks with technology, to actually a collaboration mindset, where we say, Sarah, why don't we work together? Right? Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? Well, there is a specific method to do that, and I believe that it starts not with the technology and then hoping that people will use it. I believe it starts with getting people's mindsets in the right place so that they're actually open to working together and they agree that working together is a good idea, if that's required. Then we might talk about how we want to work together. Sara, how often do you want to meet? What do we want to do with these leads? You know, what's a marketing generated lead? What's a sales accepted lead? Let's define that. How do we measure it? What does success look like? And all of a sudden we're saying, what processes do we use, right? And then you can use the technology to support those processes that we've agreed on, right? And then the technology will actually get used because we've agreed that that's what we're going to do, right? And there's a quite distinct way of doing this, and this is the OneTEAM method I talked about earlier, and it rolls out in 5 discrete steps, right? And the steps exist so that you can just dip your toe in the water at first, and then you add value each time, and as you go up the ladder. So the first step is a benchmarking survey. So we have something called the Smarketing score. So we can tell you how collaborative your people are in the organization by applying a Smarketing score. So this is the metric I talked about earlier. Then the next step is to say, okay, we've got the survey. And by the way, the survey is anonymous, so you don't have to put your name to it. You can say whatever you want, right? Which is really opening up a conversation. Right? And the next step then is to say, those people that participate in the survey have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm available to be interviewed anonymously on my responses. So Switzerland can come in and say, Sara, I noticed in your response you said this. What made you say that? And you can say, blah.
Get it all out.
Yeah, that's right. Because for the first time you've probably been asked, but for the first time you've been asked by a person that you can not worry about whether it's going to come back to you.
It's not internal.
Right?
Yeah.
So we get nuggets of gold from the organization, and the best value is often from people that have ideas in terms of how to fix it, but they've never felt empowered or never been asked to voice their ideas. And so there's actually ideas within the organization that we can plug out for you and present back to you, and you can then implement them. And the same thing exists for customers. So we had sales and marketing coming together, talking to the customer. If we didn't ask the customer their opinion, we'd only get half the picture. Right? So we also go out and we interview customers, and we want customers all along the life cycle. So we want loyal customers, because they're going to tell us a different story, to at-risk customers, to prospective customers. Right? And so we can actually get this 360-degree view of sales and marketing and the customers and how it all looks in real life, because they'll tell Switzerland what they really think. And it's actually quite funny in these conversations. They start off all polite, and then 3 minutes later they go, right, tell them this. And that's the real information that you want as an organization. The next step is then to put all that information together and help you create the solution that you design. So we just help you design your own solution, but it's based on the findings from the previous 3 steps, and we help you to prioritize what you think is most important. Then we work on that first, and then second and third. So it's your plan. Right? And the 5th step is then to help you implement the plan, because very few organizations have people sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for something new to come along. You've actually got to stop doing something to start something new, or you bring in people from the outside to help you do that, and so we help you with that. Right? And so the thing that I want to point out is that if your viewers are interested in just dipping their toe in the water and just doing the first step, we've actually got a special on for $97 per sales and marketing person, right? $97 to run the survey, give them their Smarketing score, and give them a report and an executive review of what we found.
Excellent. And people can go into the resources folder to actually, there's a link in there that we've included, and that will take you straight there so you can take up Peter on his offer today.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I'm really, really inspired to get back, and instead of taking my usual approach, I might try and collaborate and communicate a little bit more effectively. But I think, if you could give one piece of advice for people out there who may be struggling with sales and marketing alignment, what would it actually be?
Okay, I would suggest you do this, right? If you're a sales leader or a marketing leader, you have this fantastic opportunity to say it's been 10 years and we haven't addressed this one last bastion of productivity gain that hides in this organization. Right?
Yeah.
So follow me, be a leader and pick up the baton and talk to your counterpart in sales or to your counterpart in marketing or to the person that you report into and say, let's do better. Let's stop blaming each other.
Yeah.
Right? So it's what I said earlier in that slide. Marketing people stop hiding behind your technology and pretending that the leads are good. Salespeople stop passing the buck to marketing.
Yeah.
And sales and marketing leaders stop the denial. Right? It's hindering your business growth. Get up and be the leader that you said you are.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great. I know we could spend a whole day talking about this sort of stuff. So I'm sure we'll have you back in the future. And thank you everyone online for joining. It's been fantastic to have you with us. If you do have any further questions for Peter, we'll let you know when we send out the recording email. We'll put your direct details on there. And as always, thank you very much for joining the Redback Business Skills series. We hope to see you next time. Bye for now.